Outlaw Law is brought to you by Whitaker and Hamer, attorneys and counselors at law. Your law firm for life.
Welcome back into the Outlaw Lawyers. Your hosts, Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, managing partners, Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. Offices conveniently located in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay-Varina, Gastonia, and now in Morehead City. And again, Josh and Joe, practicing attorneys here in North Carolina. I'm Morgan Patrick, consumer advocate. We get into the topics each and every week. If you've got a legal situation, you've got questions about what you're going through, and you need some advice, I've got a phone number for you. You can get in touch with Whitaker and Hamer, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186, and leave your contact info, briefly what the call's about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. And you can always email your question to the program, and we'll answer that on a future show. It's questions@theoutlawlawyer.com. Josh and Joe?
All right, Joseph. So the U.S. Supreme Court is back in session, right? So last year's session, we talked about Dodd. We talked about all these cases a lot, but it was a very active Supreme Court session, a very controversial U.S. Supreme Court session. But the off season's over. It's kind of like hockey, right? I never noticed that.
I was going to say, that's big for you, man. Like me and Morgan look at the start of like the NFL, NBA seasons, and we get super geeked out, and you're looking at the Supreme Court's back in session. It's opening day.
Oh my!
We're
popcorn!
I didn't
painting
realize
your face red, white, and blue, and
get your gavel out. Smack!
Yeah.
I didn't realize how the off seasons mirror each other so closely. I've never noticed that before, but they're back. They've been back. I think the session started last week. But what they do is, they just have all these things lined up. We already know what cases they're going to hear. Oral arguments get scheduled.
The schedule's been released already.
Yes,
the non-conference schedule.
But they're being watched I can't remember the last time like national media, everybody's kind of dialed in to see what the court will do now that there's a conservative majority. And again, we try to stay apolitical. So whether you're conservative or not, we just try to talk about the law and what's being discussed, but it's hard not to know that there's a conservative majority and that certain things are being overturned and the court is looking at things in a different way than it has in the past. Cause there's been a liberal majority since, I don't know, the 60s. I don't know how far back it goes, but the court generally has a liberal majority. And last year was the first year where that was not the case. And so, things are operating a little bit differently, but there's a case. The most interesting thing I have seen so far is there's a case, and I didn't know much about this case until I was kind of listening into the oral arguments. But California had a prop. I think they called it Prop 12, but they had something that was voted on. California by itself. What do they say? If you take California out of the United States and make it its own country, it's the 6th largest economy in the world. Something like that.
Yeah, it's big, man.
But they have progressive, right? Their state house, their state legislature is very progressive, and they make a lot of like what they just said, everything's got to be an electric car by like 2035, and they make these laws, and the rest of the country kind of has to, if you make cars and you want to sell cars in the US, then the California market is arguably one of your most important markets, and you kind of have to meet that. We represent a lot of folks who sell things or sell services or sell goods countrywide. So even though I practice in North Carolina, I'm a North Carolina attorney, I'm even aware of some things that the state of California passes because it affects people, companies in North Carolina who are selling things, countrywide. So it's something we've seen a lot. And so California has adopted our Prop 12, which is basically, I won't go into the details, but it changes how they only want to sell pork in their state, pork products in their state, where the pigs, the hogs, they have been raised in a certain, arguably more humane way, right? So the pork industry has standards right now on how big a cage has to be for a breeding pig. And California wants that to be bigger, larger. They want to change these standards. And so they know that their economy is large and they're in this position where, hey, if we pass it, a lot of pork producers are just going to have to do it, even though it's not a federal law, even though every other state might disagree with us. So they passed this Prop 12 where you can only sell pork in the state of California that's raised a certain way. And so pork producers, other interested parties are challenging that, saying that California as a state should not be able to affect kind of interstate commerce, right? The feds can for sure, but can a state, no matter how big, pass something that's going to affect the economy of other states? And so that was it was actually it was very interesting. There were some other laws they kind of put up there. It seemed like the justices were kind of leaning towards California can't do this. There's we talk about tests, right? We got different tests for different things. When judges have a certain fact pattern, they have to apply certain tests. It's almost like mathematics, Joseph, right? You want to figure out the circumference of a circle, then you've got an equation. And so we have these lawyers and judges have these tests. But I don't know if have you ever gone camping in New York? You ever go camping in New York ever?
No, but I've eaten a lot of pork.
If you camp in
That's
New
what I
York,
thought we were talking about is pork. You know,
right? Well,
That's
That
what
makes
I've
you
been
an
waiting on.
expert. That
I've
makes
been
you an
waiting,
expert.
man, for my moment. Yeah, I don't know anything about this law, but I know something about eating pork.
So if you go camping in New York, you're not allowed to bring in firewood from outside the state because they don't want you bringing in any pest or if it's been treated with certain chemicals that are illegal in New York. So that's a big deal. They'll ask you where your firewood came from. Firewood's more expensive in New York because they know that you can't bring it from out of state. And so the California folks were comparing their law to laws like that. There's all kinds of laws like you're not allowed to sell real fireworks in North Carolina, right? And that affects commerce, right? That affects people who are trying to sell fireworks. They can't sell. They have to make special crappy fireworks for North Carolina. So they were bringing up all these laws that affect commerce and trying to compare this one. And sometimes we talk about how laws are burdensome and less restrictive means. And so, the justices were saying, well, they can just label pork that's not raised the way they want to. And then California consumers will have a choice. And anyway, but the justices really, and this is a case that doesn't divide, the liberal wing of the court, the conservative wing of the court. This is something that doesn't divide them that way. It kind of divides them a different way. So it was interesting to see Justice Kagan and Justice Roberts and Justice Barrett kind of asking the same questions. Kind of seems like they're on the same. The court was leaning against striking this down, like this wouldn't be enforceable. But anyway, yeah, I enjoy pork, man. As I told you at my farm aid when I didn't. I guess I got a pork chop, but it wasn't the pork I was after.
Oh, I tell you, it's always an interesting discussion. Josh Whitaker, Joe Hamer, managing partners, Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm, hosts of the Outlaw Lawyers. We have a short segment coming up on the other side. We'll tell you more about the firm. Again, the guys are practicing attorneys here in North Carolina, offices in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay, Varina, Gastonia, and now in Morehead City. And if you have a legal situation you're facing, you got questions, I'll give you a number, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Get in touch with Whitaker and Hamer. Leave your contact information, briefly what the call's about, and an attorney will be in touch. And you can email your questions to the show, questions@theoutlawlawyer.com. We're back to wrap it up on the other side.